Joining us now on the line is Joe DiGenova, our legal analyst. Joe, I've been waiting to get you on the line because I got some questions.
Okay.
And you seem to be the man who might have the answers. We heard testimony last week from Mike Morell, Deputy Director of the CIA. The question that the committee was trying to get at is who edited those Benghazi talking points? And it turns out to some degree he was responsible for the edits and some moves that were designed to protect the Secretary of State. Your thoughts?
Well, there's no doubt that Mike Morell lied on his two previous appearances before that and the Senate committee. He was, in fact, directly involved in modifying the points, and he did so to protect her and to protect the president. He indicated that he purposely ignored the facts that were presented by his own chief of station on the ground and chose the reviews of analysts to say that there was a demonstration when, in fact, the analysts had no direct information about what happened on the ground. It was a remarkable performance. It was a performance that showed that he knew at the time that he edited and created the false narrative that General Petraeus was under investigation for his problem. Morell, thought he could become DCI, and that's why he modified the talking points.
Oh.
That's why he modified the talking points. And one of the most embarrassing things about this hearing was the fact that the chief of station testified the day before, and that was the first time that the committee had ever heard from the chief of station in over 2 years. What an embarrassing performance by the House Intelligence Committee and its chairman, Mike Rogers.
The other thing that we now know is that Petraeus wanted it included in the reporting that the CIA had warned the State Department that
Correct.
attacks were possible or perhaps imminent. And Morell took that out of the official reporting because he didn't want, I guess, to embarrass the current Secretary of State.
He said he didn't want to have the CIA appear to be thumping its chest over the fact that it had given a warning. That was a phony answer he gave. He took it out because he wanted to protect her and the president. They had created a false narrative with his assistance from day one. The picture of Benghazi is now become more and more in focus. And Morell, who was at the center of all of the talking point descriptions. By the way, this is not what the CIA does. They don't draft talking points. And analysts don't do what Morell asked them to do. This is not what they're there for. Analysts do long-term studies. They analyze intelligence from all over the world. They never do situational analysis that's for public consumption. For him to suggest that they do was yet another example of his lying to Congress. But I'm making a prediction. Mike Morell will never be the director of Central Intelligence, I can assure you.
Well, but Joe DiGenova, you're saying right now, you've repeated it a couple of times, that Mike Morell has lied in front of Congress. What should Congress do about that?
They will do nothing about it because Mike Rogers had an opportunity to refer him for perjury after the first two times, and he refused to do it over the objections of members of his committee.
Do you have any
there is a revolt underway in the committee against Chairman Rogers.
Well, he won't be chairman for long, but
that's good.
Do you have any hope for Darrell Issa's committee, because they have a say in this as well, don't they?
I am not happy about ISA, but here's the thing: if you refer for perjury, it goes to the Justice Department under whose tutelage.
Right.
It goes nowhere. Look at what they did with the IRS. They gave it to an Obama supporter to investigate. Well, la-di-da.
Well, that's my next question, actually. You say, what do you do if there is perjury charges? I mean, right now, Darrell Issa is weighing and will vote this week on contempt charges against Lois Lerner and her behavior before the panel. And there's some suggestion here between Darrell Issa and the ranking member, Maryland's own Elijah Cummings, that in some way Elijah Cummings was speaking directly to the counsel for Lois Lerner and in some way was negotiating whether she should or should not or would not testify before the committee. Is there any fire with all that smoke?
I think that Elijah Cummings has conducted himself in the way that brings disrepute upon the House of Representatives. He has been a shill for Ms. Lerner and her lawyers from the beginning of this. He's an embarrassment to the committee, but as you know, that doesn't mean anything to Democrats. They're delighted to be embarrassed as long as they win. And in this one, I have to say that Darrell Issa has performed very poorly. They didn't conduct the second hearing with Lois Lerner or the first hearing the way they should have. They didn't, in my opinion, approach the contempt citation the way they should have. They're going to try and have a vote on contempt, and I assume they'll have the votes to do so. And I believe that she has been in contempt from the day she issued an opening statement and refused to answer questions. But that should have been handled better by ISA. It was not handled better. It was handled poorly. And he probably has a legally sufficient basis for contempt, but it isn't perfect.
You know, late Friday, as they often do, they put out some bad news, hoping that nobody will notice. But we notice. We watch for those things. I'd like your thoughts about it. Apparently, we now learn that largely under the watch of Hillary Clinton, the State Department misplaced $6 billion. They got no idea where it went.
Well, this is classic big government. Government is too big. You can't manage it, and this proves that you can't manage it. They can't even do the paperwork to keep track of contracts. This is nothing more than filing paper and making a note and putting it in the appropriate file, both physically and in a computer. The incompetence of the contracting officers at the State Department is monumental. But remember, this was Hillary's State Department, and so this really didn't happen. This is just a figment of your imagination.
Well,
and when she runs for president, this will all be forgotten by the mainstream media, but it won't be forgotten by many people who care about that little bit and about Benghazi, which is never, ever going to go away.
Well, this is uncovered by the Inspector General. For
That's right.
5 years, we didn't even have an Inspector General over at the State Department.
That's been a fascinating tactic by the Democrat president. He has tried not to replace IGs purposely so that they wouldn't be conducting investigations and to have acting people take these jobs who are basically frightened to do their jobs. This is an example of how something like this gets delayed until after an election, the president's reelection, and the president has been masterful at clogging accountability in government. My goodness, isn't that a surprise?
Our guest is Joe DiGenova, our legal analyst, but also the former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. And this question, I think, goes to the latter description, Joe. Last week, the mayor, the day before the election, he signed into law the decriminalization of marijuana. First of all, as a former U.S. Attorney, what would you recommend the House do now? Of course, there's a 30-day waiting period for the House to evaluate this law, and they could stop it. What do you think they should do?
Well, I think they should. I think the House should pass a resolution of disapproval, which will die in the Senate. Although it is possible, given the situation that the Democratic senators are in, with their horrible reelection prospects, that a resolution of disapproval could pass both houses. I would pass a resolution of disapproval because if it had dealt with medical marijuana alone, I can see that. I can understand controlled use of marijuana by doctors with special prescriptions. But decriminalization is not something that should be done. I just don't believe in it. I think it's a big mistake.
Well, especially since we're now learning that in Colorado, where they've had completely legal marijuana, that the drug dealers are flourishing.
That's exactly. Of course, anytime you can't legalize it and not have a black market, because someone's always going to undercut the price of anything.
Exactly.
That's why black markets exist.
All right, Joe, thanks for joining us as always.
You bet, guys.
It's 7:15 now.